Hello everybody, and welcome to my first video. For today's video, we're going to be doing the solar system tier list. This tier list is going to consist of the sun as well as all the major planets and some of the moons associated with those planets. Let's get right into it. First, we're going to start out with the sun. The sun is the center of the solar system and accounts for about 99.86% of all the mass in the entire solar system. Most of this mass is hydrogen and helium, but also consists of other elements more towards the core. The sun is a G-type main sequence star, also known as yellow dwarf. Even though only about 5% of stars in the Milky Way are considered bigger, and it shines brighter than 85% of all stars in the Milky Way, it's still somehow considered a yellow dwarf. So, the sun is pretty much a giant fusion reactor. It converts 4.26 million metric tons of mass into energy every single second. All that fusion produces almost 400 septillion watts of power. To put that in perspective, the entire world uses around 15 terawatts of power. So, it's a lot. All this energy makes the sun extremely hot, about 27 million degrees Fahrenheit at its core, and cools down to about 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit at its surface. This is still hot enough to melt tungsten though, which has the highest melting point of any element. After the sun runs out of hydrogen, it'll switch to fusing helium instead. At this time, it'll balloon up and pretty much engulf all three planets up to Mars. So, yeah. But luckily, we'll all be long gone before that happens. Maybe. The sun is definitely S tier. There's no doubt about it. On to Mercury. Mercury is the first planet from the sun, and is also the smallest in the entire solar system. Along with it being the closest planet to the sun, it also has the shortest year, lasting about 88 Earth days. Mercury has the highest iron content of any planet in the entire solar system. It has a solid iron inner core, with a liquid iron outer core. This outer core gives it a magnetosphere. Its magnetosphere is pretty weak, but it's still strong enough to deflect solar winds. Mercury has permanently shadowed poles, which gives it a high probability of having water ice in its thousands of craters near its poles. Mercury is outsized by two moons, Ganymede and Titan, and is only about 1.4 times bigger than our own moon. Mercury's temperature varies wildly depending on which side you're on. On the shadowed side, temperatures can reach as low as negative 280 degrees Fahrenheit, but on the sunny side, it can reach upwards of 800 degrees Fahrenheit. However, the poles never rise above negative 135 degrees Fahrenheit. Mercury was observed for the first time in 1610 by Thomas Harriot and Galileo, but it has been known for thousands of years due to its brightness in the sky. Mercury's atmosphere is virtually non-existent. Most of its atmosphere consists of atoms being blasted off by the solar radiation from the sun. Its atmosphere is nearly a perfect vacuum. I just realized I forgot to put the sun up in S tier, but there it is now. All in all, Mercury is not very interesting. It is a nice planet, being that it's the first from the sun, and it does have a magnetosphere. I like magnetospheres. But I think I'm going to have to put it in D tier. It's basically just a big, dense rock, so it's going in D tier. Up next is Venus. I didn't have a yellow marker, so I just used an orange one, but let's just say that's yellow. Venus is the second planet from the sun. It may have been very similar to Earth a long time ago. At one point in time, Venus may have been able to harbor life, but due to a runaway greenhouse effect, it can't anymore. Venus has an atmosphere mostly composed of CO2, but it also has roaming clouds that rain sulfuric acid, so it's not very habitable. During the space race, the Soviets developed probes meant to withstand the immense pressure and temperature and also acidic environment of Venus. The first one they sent lasted 23 minutes. Not a very long time. This is still pretty impressive though, considering Venus's atmosphere is 92 times that of Earth's, and the temperatures can get up to 800, 900 degrees. That's pretty impressive. The second probe they sent lasted 2 hours, which was the longest lasting probe of any. It was able to gather some good data as well as pictures. Venus is the third brightest object in the sky after the sun and the moon. It takes Venus 225 days to make one full rotation around the sun, and 243 days to make one full rotation around its axis. So technically, a day on Venus lasts longer than a year on Venus. Venus also spins clockwise, which is the opposite of what most planets spin. This is called spinning in retrograde, and is very unusual in the solar system. Venus is basically the same size as Earth, but is about 20% less massive. Venus also has a magnetosphere, but is much weaker than Earth's. All in all, Venus is one of my favorite planets, but it can't compete with some of the other ones, so I'm going to have to put it in A tier. Now on to Earth. Earth needs no introduction. It's where we all live, and is the only planet in the solar system known to harbor life, which that alone gives it classification for S tier. Earth is the third planet from the Sun, and is the fifth largest by mass and size in the solar system. Earth has many different properties that enable life, like its magnetosphere, which helps shield from solar radiation. Without this magnetosphere, our atmosphere would be stripped away and deadly radiation would be able to leach into Earth. The Earth's surface is 70% water, and 97% of that is from the ocean. Speaking of the ocean, did you know that only 5% of the ocean has been explored? So, who knows what's down there? Earth is definitely S tier, there's no doubt about it. On to the moon. Now we have the moon, otherwise known as Luna. The moon is about 240,000 miles away from Earth, and moves away about an inch every single year. It's the fifth largest moon in the entire solar system, in mass and size, and is actually bigger than Pluto. The moon has a solid iron core, as well as a liquid outer core. This makes a very weak magnetic field that is not able to stop solar winds. The moon has massive tunnels formed from volcanic activity early on in its life. These tunnels may be able to be used for bases if we ever are able to go back to the moon, if we ever did at all. These tunnels can shield from the extreme radiation on the moon and also stay at a more stable temperature. Well, that concludes the moon. I'm going to put the moon at D tier just because it doesn't have a whole lot of interesting properties. Now on to the red planet, Mars. Mars has been the face of space exploration for a while now, having sent multiple rovers there, and SpaceX wanting to send one of their starships there by 2026. There is not expected to be any life on Mars, but we are looking for signs of life that may existed back whenever Mars had water roaming on its surface. Mars is about half the size of Earth, and about 29% less dense. This makes the gravity on Mars about 62% lower than that of Earth's. Mars does have some similarities to Earth though. Its solar day is a little over 24 hours, very similar to Earth's, and its axial tilt is about 25%, just a little bit more than Earth's. Mars has a very thin atmosphere composed mostly of CO2, but it also has traces of nitrogen and argon. The temperatures on Mars fluctuate massively, being as high as 70 degrees Fahrenheit in the day, but can dip to as low as negative 225 degrees Fahrenheit at night. There's evidence that Mars used to be real wet, with things like deltas and riverbeds being found all over Mars' surface. Mars has a dense core made of iron and nickel. It used to be able to support a magnetosphere, but no longer does. Mars is also home to the largest volcano in the solar system, called Olympus Mons. It is about 3 times larger than Mount Everest. Mars is also home to 2 moons, Phobos and Deimos. Mars is basically a ran down Earth that died a long time ago. I'm putting it in B tier. Still pretty cool though. Now we're on to Phobos and Deimos. I think I'm pronouncing those right. They're both kind of shaped like potatoes, and they're both pretty bland. So I'm going to put them both in F tier. They're basically just a big rock floating around Mars. Now we're on to Jupiter. Jupiter is the big dog of the solar system, being outsized only by the sun. Jupiter is so big that if you took all the other planets and moons and everything in the entire solar system besides the sun and combined them, it would still be twice as massive. So Jupiter's pretty hefty. Comparing Jupiter to the sun, however, it's a pretty big different story. It would take about 1,000 Jupiters to equal one of our sun. And it would take Jupiter about 75 times more mass to even can be considered to start fusion. The Great Red Spot, on Jupiter is basically just a massive storm that's been going on for hundreds of years. Gotta love physics. Jupiter's home to about 95 moons. A few of them that we'll go over here in just a little bit. But it still doesn't have the most moons of any planet. That would be Saturn. There's some evidence that Jupiter protects Earth from asteroids and comets, but doing some more research, it also shows that Jupiter can also kind of sling them to Earth, so it's sort of a double-edged sword. So Jupiter has an extremely powerful magnetosphere, about 20,000 times more powerful than Earth's. This is due to the metallic hydrogen at its core. Jupiter has the shortest day in the entire solar system at about 9.9 hours. It has a tilt of only about 3 degrees, which means the season on Jupiter wouldn't be that bad, if you don't count the 300 mile per hour winds, crushing pressures, and massive fluctuations in temperatures as you go down. So it's not that bad. Jupiter's a very impressive planet. I was going to rate it A before doing some research, but it's definitely going S. Now on to Io. It may look like a big piece of cheese, but it's not. Io is one of the most volcanically active places in the entire solar system. Io is the 4th largest moon in the entire solar system, and it gets that cheesy look from a little dusting of sulfur across its entire surface. Io is only slightly larger than our moon, about 5% larger, but it's much more dense. The average temperature on Io is around negative 200 degrees Fahrenheit, but there are hot spots scattered all over its surface near its volcanic activity that can reach degrees of up to 300 degrees Fahrenheit. Io has a very thin atmosphere containing mostly sulfur products excreted by its volcanic activity all throughout its atmosphere. All in all, Io is pretty interesting. I'm going to put it in C tier. Now I move on to Europa. Europa may look very boring, but underneath all that icy crust is thought to be a salty ocean capable of supporting life. Europa is the smallest of the 4 largest moons of Jupiter, and is slightly smaller than Earth's moon. Europa has a very thin atmosphere, mainly composed of oxygen. Europa is thought to be a fairly young moon because of the lack of craters on its surface. I like Europa. Hopefully one day we can find life on it, but I'm going to put it in C tier for now. Now I'm on to Ganymede. Ganymede is the largest moon in the entire solar system, and it's actually bigger than our smallest planet, Mercury. Ganymede is composed of about half water and half rock, with an iron core. Similar to Europa, underneath its icy crust, it is thought to have a salty ocean that may also be capable of harboring life. Ganymede has an atmosphere mostly composed of oxygen and may even contain an ozone layer. I like that. All in all, Ganymede's pretty cool. I'm going to have to put it in B tier. Now we're on to Callisto. Callisto is the 2nd largest moon of Jupiter and the 3rd largest moon in the entire solar system, and is believed to be very old due to the heavy cratering on its surface. Out of all 4 moons, it has the farthest orbit away from Jupiter, and is believed, like Ganymede and Europa, is beginning to become a trend, to have a salty ocean underneath its icy crust. Life in these oceans would most likely be pretty primitive, like bacteria or other single-cell organisms, but you never know, there may be big octopuses underneath there. I'm going to give Callisto a B rating. Just a little bit below Ganymede, but it's still pretty cool. It's a very big moon. Now we're on to Saturn. Saturn is the 6th planet from the Sun. Saturn is composed mainly of hydrogen and helium like Jupiter, and is smaller, but not a whole lot smaller, but it's much less massive, like 60%, 70% less massive. It takes light about 80 minutes to reach Saturn from the Sun. That makes its average temperature around negative 290 degrees. Saturn has the most moons of any planet at 146, and it also has the very distinctive rings that are supposed to be made up of comets and asteroids, and maybe even other moons that have been ripped up by Saturn's crushing gravity. Saturn's rings reach out to over 175,000 feet, but they're only about 30 feet wide, so they're pretty deceptive. Saturn has the lowest density of any planet in our entire solar system. It's actually less dense than water, so you could technically stick it in a tub and it would float. Saturn's core is very similar to Jupiter's, which is very dense in the middle and is covered by a metallic hydrogen outer layer, which also gives it its magnetosphere. Its magnetosphere is 578 times greater than Earth's, but not near as powerful as Jupiter's. Saturn's pretty cool. Not as cool as Jupiter, but the rings definitely give it an edge. So I'm going to put it in A tier. Now we're on to Mimas. Mimas. I don't know how to say it, but there it is. Mimas is one of Saturn's moons, and is the 7th largest of all Saturn's moons. It has the lowest density of any of the moons of Saturn. Mimas is basically just a big ice cube. That's what gives it its low density. And in 2014, it was thought to have an ocean, and then someone in 2017 said it didn't. And then someone in 2022 said it does. So, I guess it does. I'm really not sure. I'll leave that up to you. I'm going to put this one in F tier, mostly because I don't know how to say it, and it's just a big ice cube. So, F tier. Now we're on to Enceladus. Enceladus is the 6th largest moon of Saturn. Similar to Ganymede and Europa, Enceladus definitely has an ocean. We know this because we can see water spouts being shot out of its surface. These water spouts can break through the crust at speeds of 1,300 miles an hour. Its salty ocean is thought to have organic molecules like methane and propane, and we also discovered in 2013 hydrogen cyanide, which is thought to be a precursor to life. Enceladus is pretty cool. I'm going to put it in B tier, right there with Ganymede and Europa, because it has very good potential for life. Now we're on to Tethys. Tethys is the 5th largest moon in Saturn. It's really not very cool. It's basically just a big ice cube, very similar to Mimas. So I'm going to put it in F tier. I decided to do Rione, Lapetus, and Rhea all in the same kind of rating because they're all basically the same. Basically just big ice cubes floating around Saturn. Some of them may have an ocean, but I couldn't really find anything very interesting. This is the 4th largest of Saturn. This is the 3rd, and this is the 2nd. There's really nothing very interesting about them besides the fact that they may have an ocean. So I'm going to put all of them in F. Just going to take a quick break and show you where we're at right now and explain that just because I rate something in F doesn't mean it's not awesome. It just means that I don't think it competes with the others in the ranking above it. So there you go. Now we're on to Titan, the largest moon of Saturn. Titan is probably my favorite moon in the entire solar system. Titan has an atmosphere mostly composed of nitrogen, and its atmosphere is actually more dense than Earth's. Titan is actually larger than Mercury in sheer size, but because it's mostly made of ice, its density is much lower and it's much less massive. Titan has rivers and seas and lakes of liquid methane and other hydrocarbons flowing all over its surface. Even though Titan is definitely not habitable on its surface, beneath its icy crust is thought to be one of the most habitable places in the entire solar system other than Earth. It is thought to have a liquid water ocean underneath its crust, like many other moons that we've went over. Titan has clouds of methane and other hydrocarbons floating all through its atmosphere, and this hydrocarbons and methanes are very capable of trapping the heat and making Titan much warmer than it would be otherwise. Titan is a very beautiful moon. I just hope the US doesn't discover that it has all that methane, or it might go invade it. Titan's definitely going in S tier. I love that it has an atmosphere, and the fact that its atmosphere is more dense than Earth is pretty crazy in my opinion. Now we're on to Uranus, or Uranus, whatever you want to call it. Uranus is the 7th planet from the Sun, and is known as an ice giant. It's the 3rd largest planet by diameter, and the 4th largest by mass. It has an extreme axial tilt, a little over 82 degrees, which basically means it's almost laying on its side. Because of this extreme tilt, one of its poles experiences sunlight for 42 years, while the other side experiences darkness for 42 years. Uranus is composed mostly of hydrogen and helium, but has a very large amount of water, which gives it the term ice giant. It also has large amounts of methane and ammonia. I find this really cool that it can have all this ammonia and methane, because the ammonium methane takes energy to make, so I don't really know where all that comes from. So if you can let me know in the comments, I would really appreciate that. Uranus is very far away from the sun, about twice the distance from the sun as Saturn is. So if you have Saturn here and the sun here, it's like twice as far. Because of this distance and the fact that it's much dimmer than all the other planets, it took a while for it to be discovered as a planet. It is the least massive of all the gas giants. It's still slightly bigger than Neptune, but is less dense. But it's about 4 times bigger than Earth. As you get deeper into Uranus's atmosphere, the pressure and temperature becomes so high that it can squeeze carbon atoms into diamonds. These diamonds then can rain down to its mantle, so its mantle is thought to have layers of diamonds. Uranus does have a magnetosphere. It's still very powerful, about 100 times more powerful than Earth's, but not as powerful as Saturn and Jupiter's. Uranus's magnetosphere is made from a conductive soup of liquids like water, ammonia, and methane that move around and create its magnetosphere. All in all, I like Uranus. It gets overlooked a lot, and it has some pretty good qualities, so I'm going to have to put it in A tier. I'm also going to rank some of Uranus's moons. This is a list of the 4 biggest ones. I'm doing them all together because, like some of Saturn's moons, they're mostly made of ice, so I really couldn't find a whole lot to rank them on, so I'm just going to put them all in F tier. One cool thing about them, though, is they're all named after characters from a William Shakespeare play, so I find that pretty interesting. Okay, we're officially on the last official planet. Neptune is the 8th and furthest planet from the sun. Neptune is another ice giant and is very similar to Uranus. It is a little bit more dense and is slightly smaller. It was discovered in 1846 and became the last planet in our solar system until 1930, whenever Pluto was crowned the last planet, but then it was taken away. So now it has a crown again. Neptune has 16 known moons, with Triton being its biggest one, making up 99.5% of all the mass orbiting it. Neptune's composition is very similar to Uranus's, being mostly composed of hydrogen and helium, with varying amounts of ammonia and methane. Neptune, just like Uranus, is also believed to rain diamonds down to its icy mantle. Its magnetosphere is also thought to be made from the same conductive soup of water, ammonia, and methane, just like Uranus. Neptune has a very powerful storm going on. It's known as the Great Dark Spot, very similar to Jupiter's Great Red Spot. I didn't mention it with any of the other gas giants, but Neptune, along with all the other gas giants like Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune, they all have rings, but they're just not as vibrant as Saturn's. I'm going to rank Neptune right there with Uranus at A tier. Now we're on to Triton. Triton is Neptune's largest moon and is the 7th largest moon in the entire solar system. Triton is thought to be a dwarf planet that was caught by Neptune's gravity, and it actually spins the opposite way of Neptune's rotation, which is very uncommon in the solar system. Triton has a thin atmosphere composed mostly of nitrogen with a little bit of methane and CO2 mixed in there. Like many of the other moons that we've mentioned, Triton is also thought to have a salty sea underneath all of that crust, which could have the potential to harbor life. Underneath all that ice and rock is thought to be a metallic core, which makes up the majority of the mass of Triton. Triton makes up 99.5% of all the mass orbiting Neptune, so it's really big. Triton has the largest cryovolcanic area in the entire solar system, called Leviathan Pantera. It's about 100 kilometers in diameter, and surrounding it is about 500,000 square kilometers of plain made from it. These cryovolcanoes can make massive lakes of stable water on its surface. All in all, Triton's a really cool moon, and I like it. I just really hope it has life on it. I'm going to put it in B tier. Now we're on to what is once my favorite planet, but is now my favorite dwarf planet. Pluto is the 9th largest object in space to directly orbit the sun. It's about 1/6 the mass of our moon, and is mostly made of ice. I had to put Pluto in S, only for sentimental reasons though. It's really kind of boring other than that. Charon's going to be the last thing I'm going to be ranking. I thought about ranking some of the other dwarf planets past Pluto, but they're all pretty much the same, mostly made of ice and rock. Charon's about half the size of Pluto and 1/8 the mass, so it's really nothing to write home about. I'm going to put it in F tier because there's really not a whole lot interesting about it. If you made it to the end, thank you for watching my very first video. Sorry if the quality was pretty low. I'm not really sure what I'm doing right now. I'm probably not going to stick with only space stuff. I'll probably branch out and do whatever I find interesting, but if you like what I did and like watching my video, please consider subscribing. But if that's all, thank you for watching and have a great day.